Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for today's Knowledge Wednesday. We are happy to have with us Husna Tara, who along with her husband stands at the helm of brand Glenburn that is known for its boutique properties and fine guest experiences. They have properties in Calcutta and Darjeeling, Glenburn Tea Estate and the penthouse in Kolkata, which I had the privilege of staying in recently. Husna's attention to detail and a sense of style and taste. You have to hear this. The room that I stayed in had even the electric kettle of the matching shade of aqua green. The rest of the accessories were. So full marks to Husna for her eye for detail. Shuttling between England and India, she manages to see the running of both the properties. A decade ago, she was able to extend her experience to Calcutta, the city, offering tours and walks, unraveling the rich colonial history of the city and its culture through immersive experiences. Today, Husna will speak about her story of Calcutta. Over to you, Husna.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Very privileged to be invited to talk about my passion for Bengal. I'm going to talk about Calcutta as well. I still call it Calcutta, even though it's been renamed Kolkata. But I like to talk about the whole region as Bengal, as a sort of historical region that encompass that whole part of India, the east. So you'll see a little digression towards other neighboring states as well. But I want to give you this wonderful picture of this part of India so that you can really share this with your clients, with your guests. And hopefully it'll be, the new Rajasthan, the new Kerala one day. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen, if that's okay, and then introduce you to, okay. Great. So I'm not Bengali. I'm not from this part of India, but I've been here 22 years. And the passion that you'll hear me speak about the region today is really a testament to how I have become very much a part of Bengal, and it's become something that I want to really tell the rest of the world because I feel so strongly about it. So I grew up in England, but spent 6 years in a boarding school in India, and then went back to England to the University of Cambridge for 6 years. And then when I was backpacking around the world during my gap year, I met a tea planter. We fell in love, and then I ended up in Eastern India, living in Calcutta, and getting involved with their family tea business. We started off in Kerala on a tea estate in around about 2000, when God's Own Country was really sort of picking up. And the whole concept of the vineyard experience that we'd seen in Europe and other parts of the world showed us that possibly tea estates could be opened up with a similar wine tasting experience, but replacing that with tea. So we thought about that, but we ended up selling that tea estate, and Glenburn came into the family in 2001. My husband is a fourth generation tea planter, so his family's been in tea for many, many generations. And when we saw Glenburn and looked out at Mount Kanchenjunga with 1,600 acres of private forests, rivers, the mountains, the third highest mountain in the world, we thought, okay, if we're going to do something, let's do it over here. And within a couple of years, our little 4-room hotel had made it to the Tatler Guide to the best 101 hotels in the world. We started taking ourselves seriously at that point, added another 4 rooms. And then 12 years ago, my guests started talking about Calcutta and wanting to experience something in Calcutta. I knew nothing about it. I was a science teacher by profession. I studied natural sciences at Cambridge, so I had no interest in history. In fact, I used to laugh at my friends when they read history, saying it was a complete waste of time. But when I started to delve into the history of Bengal, I realized how incredible it was. And within a few years, we'd started doing our tours of the city. It started off with just a heritage walk. Then it ended up being a visit into somebody's home, a boat cruise, then delving into the Bengal Renaissance of the 19th century through North Calcutta. And suddenly we had a 3-day experience that we were offering our guests. And of course, from there came the request to start a hotel. And that's how our second baby, the Glenburn Penthouse, was conceived. And it opened 2 seasons ago. So I'm going to talk about Bengal, And many of these slides and experiences were part of Destination East, which was a trade fair that we started 10 years ago in the east of India, bringing FTOs and people across to Eastern India, supported by CII and the government of Bengal. So the first few slides will talk about the region and set the scene, and then I'll delve into different experiences with Bengal, hoping that these stories will be things that you can take out to your clients and really tempt them to visit. But I'm going to start by reading out my ode to Bengal. I wrote this a couple of months ago when we were trying to put together a slightly wider itinerary. I've actually printed it in a series of slides so that you can all hear it properly. But once upon a time, 12% of the world's GDP came from this part of India. Merchants sailed across the globe to lay their hands on her riches. Her soil produced yards of silk, muslin, chintz, indigo, and jute, tea, and spices. In the 18th century, the battles of Europe were fought on her river, and whoever controlled her trade controlled the rest of the world. In the 19th century, she championed the birth of modern India through social reform, with art, culture, and literature flourishing through the Bengal Renaissance. And then she went on to lead India's independence movement. But today, Bengal is still a place where all religions still find a happy home, where festivals and football make her city stop and remember the importance of community and family. And our guests really, really enjoy this aspect. We really show people the local vibe and take people under the skin of the city. In Calcutta, idle gossip is replaced by intellectual debate over endless cups of masala chai. It's a place where newspapers and morning walks still inaugurate every day. Nothing starts before 11 a.m. And there is a purposeful intent to change the world. As they say, what Bengal thinks today, the rest of India thinks tomorrow. They say if you have one Bengali, you have a poet. If you have two Bengalis, you have a debating society. If you have three Bengalis, you have a political party. And as we walk through the streets of the city with our guests, these are the kind of vibes and these are the kind of themes that they take home with them. So our story of Bengal is really a journey through her extraordinary history as well as her modern day vibe. We will walk her streets, delve into her countryside, and live in some fabulously restored palaces, enjoying her imperial grandeur, her rich artistic culture, and her delectable gastronomy. Sail her rivers, discovering ancient capitals, European settlements, and trading posts, magnificent mosques, terracotta temples, grandiose churches, synagogues, and bustling markets. But most importantly, her smiling people. Currently branded as the sweetest part of India, she will not disappoint. So this was an ode that I wrote to Bengal that really sums up my 22 years of living over here. And a couple of sort of housekeeping slides just to set the scene. This is the state of Bengal over here. And you can see how it stretches all the way up to the mountains, up in the Himalayas in Darjeeling, and then all the way down to the Bay of Bengal and the Sundarbans. It's this part of India over here. It's also a gateway to the whole of East and Northeast India, including the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And Bengal historically included the states of Bihar and of Orissa, and of course Bangladesh. Bangladesh was very much part of Bengal. So my story covers this entire region, which I feel deserves a lot more recognition. It's also well connected. It's a gateway to the East in terms of East Asian cities as well. And you can get to us fairly easily. And there's a very strong domestic flight network as well. But let's dive into the wonders of Bengal. So you have the third highest mountain, Mount Kanchenjunga. And this is a scene that was a photograph that was taken from our hotel, Glenburn Tea Estate, but it's something that you can see from many of the hotels in Darjeeling and in that North Bengal area. And then you go all the way down to the Sundarbans, where you have miles and miles of mangrove forests, and amazing birds and little canals and beautiful sunsets. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and of course the Royal Bengal tiger that came from Bengal, and there is a large proportion of Royal Bengal tigers that do live in this region. The east of India has many national parks, and you get the big five wildlife coming out of these sanctuaries, and guests have access to them through the parks in Assam, the Northeast, and in North Bengal as well. And of course, the one-horned rhino up in Kaziranga, but also in some of the parks in North Bengal also. Incredible bird species. At Glenburn, we have over 100 birds on our bird list. And orchids as well. Orchids in Kalimpong, in the whole of North Bengal. Orchids are a beautiful part of this region. But even in the city, we have the Kalkutta Botanical Gardens that are just on the outside. It's 270 acres of botanical diversity, 12,000 specimens. And this is a picture of the old banyan tree that doesn't have a mother trunk anymore, but it has these sort of aerial roots that surround it. It's impossible to take a picture of it. But this is where many of these orchids and many of the plants of the 19th century found their way into the country, including the tea plant. The tea plant came from China, and it was during the Opium Wars when the English could not get any more tea from China for the growing demand that they had to find a way to grow it in India. And so they sent a spy into China dressed as a Mandarin, and he brought the tea flower, the Camellia sinensis, into India and into the heart of Calcutta in the botanical gardens. We have beaches as well, 6 of them in Bengal and also in neighboring Orissa, and of course the Andamans, where you can connect very easily and combine itineraries between Bengal and this area. And of course the 2 best tea regions in India. You have Assam, the valley of the Brahmaputra, where you have the strong multi teas. We have a family estate up there as well in a place called near Sibsagar, called Khungia. And of course in Darjeeling, the tea fields are in the shadow of Mount Kanchenjunga. And the wonderful thing about Darjeeling is that it has geographical indexing. So just like champagne can only come from Champagne, Darjeeling tea can only come from 80-70 estates in this region. And what's really unique about it is the different types of tea that you get from one single tea bush. So in 7 days, in 1 week, you will pick the same tea bush, but in March, you will get the first flush. In June, you'll get the second flush. In the monsoon months of July, you'll get something called the monsoon flush. And then we end with the autumn crescendo in November. In addition to that, we have white tea, green tea, oolong tea. So it's a very unique form of tea, very high value, very low cropping. So that's why it's so expensive, and that's why it's known as the champagne of tea as well. But it's related to the terroir and the region of Darjeeling up in the Himalayas. And 1,000 of these tender shoots are, make just a pound of tea, and they're all picked by hand. And that's what really gives the human face behind a cup of tea so much authenticity when people come and visit Glenburn. 300 million kgs of tea come from this region. And it's an incredible experience to see it being done. And people just don't realize that so much goes into that daily cup of tea that hopefully lots of you are drinking during this lockdown. 2 of the ancient religions of the world were born in Eastern India, Buddhism in the state of Bihar and Jainism as well. And the Jain temples in Calcutta and in this part of the country are very different to the Jain temples you find in Rajasthan. They're heavily influenced by the European sort of settlements and residents of the time. They have Belgian chandeliers, they have incredible tiles, they have a kind of glamour and a glitziness that's quite sort of interesting in the fact that they're still Jain temples, but they're quite incredible in the statues and the chandeliers and the tiles that you find within them. And of course, all the Buddhist sites in Bihar and also up in Sikkim. In Sikkim, you have 40 monasteries. And in Bengal, you have a monastery up at 8,000 feet. So this is the Goom Monastery, which is just outside the town of Darjeeling. And guests, when they come to Glenburn, will do a day trip into Darjeeling, and they will first stop at the Goom Monastery in the morning. And then they'll get onto the Darjeeling Hill Railway and do a short journey into Darjeeling town. This is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there's 86 kilometers of this running through the hillside towns of Kurseong, Kurseong, Goom, and Darjeeling. And we take guests on the Goom to Darjeeling sector of this railway. There are 8 UNESCO Heritage Sites in this part of the country: the Sundarbans, Manas, the Mabodhi temple, as well as the Konarak temple, which has 24 chariot wheels led by 6 horses in neighboring Orissa. The Neora Valley is another World Heritage Site that could make the list in time, and beautiful views of the mountains and the red panda, which is a really incredible little creature to discover when you come to that part of the country, as well as the blue poppy, which you can see in this slide. Now, in terms of the diversity, down in Calcutta, across Howrah Bridge, 4 million people make this journey into work every day. But up here, on the border of Bengal and Sikkim, 40 people cross this bridge. This is a bridge that takes you from Glenburn Tea Estate into neighboring Sikkim. And you have a river at 5 meters and also a river at 5,000 meters. So again, the diversity, plus 1,500 kilometers of cruisable area. And you now have 3 companies that are operating boat cruises on the river. Assam Bengal Navigation was the first, and this is a picture of one of their boats. And you can now do a 3-night cruise, a 7-night cruise, a 14 or a 21-night cruise, even in certain months when the water is high enough. But the 3-night cruise is sort of just in this area in and around Calcutta. The 7 nights takes you up to Farakka, covering all the European settlements and the historic capital of Bengal in Murshidabad. The second 7 nights would take you as far as Patna. And then the third 7 nights would take you, all the way up to Varanasi. That's mainly in August and September. And if any of you have read Anarchy, the new William Dalrymple book, a lot of these places that he talks about that are so central to the history of that period are only really accessible by the river, because it's very difficult to get to some of these places if you don't actually access them from there. So for example, this is the Hooghly Imambra in a place called Hooghly. There were 5 European settlements on the river: Chandranagore for the French, Serampur for the Danish, and you had Chinsura for the Dutch settlers. They were probably the first, and Bandel, where the Portuguese lived. And all these settlements have their own unique flavor. Again, they're best accessed by river. And it really does show you how, as I mentioned earlier, the battles of Europe were fought on the Hooghly in the 18th century. It's a very powerful image. Now, these terracotta temples, I mean, if you had these temples in any other part of India, you'd probably have an airport built right next to them to get people there. They're absolutely exquisite. And in Kalna, which again is pretty much accessed by the river, you have 108 Shiva temples, plus many more. And if you look at the detail over here, the whole of Bengal was built in brick. There was no natural stone, there was no natural marble. These figures and these temples are incredible. There are another 20 of them in a place called Bishnupur, which again is another World Heritage Site proposed for the list. But there was a community that lived in the historical capital of Bengal, Murshidabad, where 5% of the world's GDP came from in the 17th and 18th century. And these were the Sheher Walis. They were a community of Jain traders that came from Rajasthan and shifted to Bengal in the 17th century, when the Nawab of Bengal was becoming stronger and stronger as a ruler in eastern India. So the Mughal Empire was beginning to decline by about 1707, when Aurangzeb died. And the later rulers lived in Delhi and ruled India in name, but were not very effective. And because Bengal was such a rich province, the Nawab of Bengal, who first lived in Dhaka and then shifted his capital to Murshidabad, his name was Murshid Quli Khan, he started becoming more and more independent. And because the soil was so fertile and there was so much incredible sort of potential for textile development with the silk and the muslin, he invited these traders out to come and set up businesses. And the Sheher Wali community of Jain merchants set up their palace. They built palaces. They were money lenders. They were known as the Jagat Seths, and some of them even financed the English royal family in the 17th century. And it was a very, very rich community that really drove the economy of the region and enabled a lot of the rulers to come in and out of power. And they were vegetarians, so their food and their cuisine was really very special. And they adopted a lot of the local ways. And one such family, the Dudoria family, have just restored one of their palaces. So this is Bari Koti. And it took him Darshan Dudoria 5 years to renovate it, and rather to restore it. And it's now been welcoming guests for a couple of years, 7 courtyards, 15 suites. It's all about the stories. And Darshan and I have been working very closely to build up these stories, and he does it incredibly well, as well as the local community that works in the hotel. He has 50 local staff, just like we have 55 local staff up at Glenburn. For us, the community is the hotel is the community. You can't really separate the two. And in this region, when you stay in Bari Koti, you will visit the textile centers, the silk weaving factories, the muslin, the kantha embroidery, the Kathola Palace, which has beautiful gardens and sort of treasures that are on display. The Hazardwari Palace, which is the Palace of 1,000 Doors. It doesn't really have 1,000 doors, but this was built by the English. So after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, when Mir Jafar, who was the head of the Nawab's army, was put onto the throne by Robert Clive as a puppet ruler, they built this palace for him. And the young Nawab, Sirajudullah, who lost his throne, having sort of succumbed to the palace intrigues between his aunt, the French, who also wanted the throne of Bengal, the English, and Mir Jafar, the head of his army, eventually Robert Clive took over the whole of Bengal and they built him this palace. And that was when, again, the Jagats say it's kind of funded part of it, and Anarchy, the book by William Dalrymple, really does describe a lot of it. This is the Rajbari Bawali, which is an hour outside Calcutta, but another example of the Ravla family, Ajay Ravla, developing a fantastic experience out of this sort of built tangible as well as intangible heritage that he's managed to preserve. So this is, again, something that links up very nicely with those places. So Calcutta was built by the English for the English, and they were the last of 5 European powers that actually made it successfully into this region of India that eventually spread to the rest of India and was culminated in the presence of the British Raj after 1857. So you had the Portuguese to begin with, then the Dutch, then the Danish, and then the French and the English were kind of rivals right till the end. So much of Calcutta is dominated by this conscious intermingling in the sort of architecture, in the food, in the way people think. So you've got the Marble Palace in the top left-hand corner, which is a Bengali residence that was built as a museum in 1820 by the Malik family. They had a private zoo, and it's a fantastic place to visit when you're in the city. You have St. Paul's Cathedral. This is a place where we take people for lunch, but it used to be an old department store. And of course, Belur Math, which was built by Swami Vivekananda with features from all the religions of India coming into the architecture. So there was this conscious intermingling of Italian, Greek, Islamic, Oriental designs into the architecture. And that's a big part of what we show people in the city. The British, as I said, were the ones that reigned supreme for 257 years. This is the Victoria Memorial, which is a beautiful museum and exhibition hall. And they've recently opened up more and more of the galleries and the paintings. There's a huge new oil painting that's been unearthed a couple of months ago. That's one of the largest in the world. And Calcutta is becoming more and more a city of museums. You have the Indian Museum, which was the first museum in Asia that was set up in 1814. But you also have Metcalfe Hall, which is the old Imperial Library that has a really interesting museum right now. And the Currency Building was inaugurated by the Prime Minister in January with an art exhibition spanning 300 years of Bengali art, as well as Belvedere House, which used to be the house of the Assistant Viceroy of Bengal, which is also a museum space now. So the museum culture in Calcutta is one of the really hot new sort of scenes in the city. But what happened with these sort of colonists, or the Europeans, and in particular the English, was that you had this parallel culture of the local community leading up to what eventually became the freedom struggle. But for many years was the Bengal Renaissance of art, culture, and literature that happened through the 19th century. And as the local Bengalis were educated in order for them to join the civil services that the English needed, as well as the businesses, the business houses like the Tagore family that worked alongside the English and made lots of money, there was a lot of education that came forth. And from that came this awareness of art, literature, and culture. And this statue in particular is quite interesting because you see these three Bengali boys dressed in Western clothes with guns in their hands, standing in front of this colonial building. They actually barged into Parliament in the 1930s to protest against the imprisonment of political prisoners. They were fighting for the independence of India, but they were dressed as Westerners. And eventually they became martyrs to the cause because they were hung for treason. But Dalhousie Square, which is where we conduct a heritage walk, because a lot of the old buildings that that form the center of the British Empire are around Dalhousie Square. The square is now renamed BBD Bagh after these three boys, Binoy, Badal, and Dinesh. So this whole dichotomy that kind of explains the symbiotic relationship between the English and the local Bengali community is very, very strong as you walk around the city and as you learn about the story of Calcutta. And these were two of the pioneers that started the Renaissance. You have Raja Ram Mohan Roy on the left, who started the Brahmo Samaj, that was the first reformist movement for Hinduism. And on the right, you have Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, after whom the second bridge in Calcutta is named. And he was a great promoter of women's rights. So he helped abolish the practice of sati. He allowed widows to remarry. He allowed women to be educated. So there was a lot of sort of social reform that happened during this time, which was really, to me, the birth of modern India. And people forget that. People look at the rest of India and they forget that it was really in Bengal where modern India began, and all these thoughts and this culture was really developed. And these two pioneers, Swami Vivekananda on the left and Rabindranath Tagore on the right, were the ones that took humanism and universality out to the West. So it was a combination of scientific Western thought with spiritual Indian or Eastern thoughts that combined to almost create a religion of man and a religion of service. So Swami Vivekananda went out to the World Congress of Religions in 1893 and started his speech with brothers and sisters of the world and received a standing ovation from everyone in America. Nobody had heard of brotherhood being talked about on a global scale, only within families. And of course, Rabindranath Tagore, the grand poet of Bengal, if you go to his museum, Jorashako in Calcutta, you'll see a map of the world and the kind of places he traveled to, ranging from South America, Europe, the Middle East, North America, all in the 19th century, all by ship. There are pictures of him with Albert Einstein, with Helen Keller, of him, addressing thousands of people in America and New York. These were world ambassadors that came out of Bengal in the 19th century. He set up a school outside the city called Shanti Niketan because he believed the classroom should not have boundaries. So students were taught under the trees, and you can visit here even now. There were schools of folk music and theater that spread around the countryside, and there are festivals every winter. There are 2 literary festivals every January. There's the International Book Fair, there's half a mile of bookshops, there's the coffee house where people get together to do adda. So adda is really a word for intellectual debate. I mean, you would never call it gossip in Calcutta. And people sit on street corners in their neighborhoods, which are known as paras, which are very significant to that Bengali identity. And they chat about the world and about how they can change the world over cups of tea and over cups of coffee in the coffee house. And it's known as adda. And of course, the food. The food in Bengal is incredible. So you have the kati roll, top right-hand corner over here. Oops, sorry. That was really started for the Englishman that didn't want to get his fingers dirty. So it was a kebab in a wrap. And then you've got the biryani. Now, the biryani came to Calcutta because the king of Lucknow was exiled to Calcutta. The children of Tipu Sultan from Hyderabad were sent to Calcutta after the English defeated Mysore, and also the king of Lucknow was exiled to Calcutta. So he had this incredible biryani recipe brought from Lucknow, but because he couldn't afford to put all the spices into the biryani, he added a potato and a boiled egg. So today, Calcutta biryani has a potato and a boiled egg in it. And it's absolutely delicious. And it's one of the most popular things to order on, these online apps like Swiggy and Zomato. And of course, the street food, the sweets, the mishti, the different varieties of Bengali sweets. I mean, even during the lockdown, Bengal wrapped on their nuts for having allowed sweet shops to open during the lockdown. But the food, and we do food tours and walks around the city to introduce people to this food culture. Sport, not just cricket, football as well, has roots in Calcutta with the oldest Asian league, and you'll often have people debating and fighting their way through arguments, supporting different teams from both Calcutta locally and also from around the world. And then, of course, the festivals. The first time I attended Christmas in Calcutta, I was told, the cathedral will be really crowded. You'd better not go there today. And I said, really? And I went there and there were hundreds of people just walking through the altar of St. Paul's, queuing up for midnight mass, lighting a candle, enjoying the nativity scene. The festivals are celebrated by everyone. So you'll have Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, Parsis, Christians, Anglo-Indians, everybody celebrating each other's festivals. And during Durga Puja, there are stories of how Muslim community leaders will buy the things that a Hindu priest will need to set up their Durga Puja pandal. And in Nahum's, the Jewish bakery in Newmarket, you'll have Muslim chefs cooking Christmas cakes for Christian festivals with lines of Hindu clients outside. There's this wonderful mix of religious diversity and tolerance in Bengal that I think is very, very special. And these idols are made in a place called Kumartuli for each festival. And this is something that people really enjoy visiting. But Durga Puja is more than a festival. It's really a festival of art, and it lasts 7 days. It takes place on this scale in West Bengal, but there are also sort of celebrations around the world and around the country. But it's basically the goddess Durga, who is the wife of Lord Shiva, coming down, leaving her husband up in the mountains and coming down to Bengal from the mountains with her 4 children. So she has 4 children, Saraswati, Ganesh, Karthik, and Lakshmi. She has her lion, and on the way she slays a demon, and she eventually comes into Bengal and into people's homes as part of this festival. And the eyes of the goddess are actually painted on last. So these are straw and sort of mud idols that are made and they're sun-dried in a place called Kumartuli by all these artisan families. And it's the eyes that are painted on right at the end that bring life into the idol. And Durga Puja started off as a family festival, but became a community festival in the 19th century when the Britishers were allowed to come and enjoy the festival with these business families of Bengal. So now it is primarily a community festival. And people welcome Durga into their homes like they're welcoming a long lost daughter, and they cry on the 7th day when she is immersed back in the river. It's a very emotional festival, but it's become this festival of art. So this is something that we call a pandal. And if you look down at the bottom, you see that little woman over there. That's the scale of these. And these are 2,000 puja pandals just in central Calcutta. They say in Bengal there were 28,000 of them last year. And look at this. This is Buckingham Palace, but it's actually a pandal in Bengal, and you're given away by the bamboo in the front. It was a friend who posted this on Facebook, and inside this incredible structure that is a temporary structure just set up for 1 week, you will have the goddess. And this one, for example, if you look at these structures over here and these birds flying above the idol, this structure is made out of recycled medicine boxes. And this bird is made out of recycled construction materials. And this is where the artistry and the craft comes in, and the stories. So this one, for example, the inside, the ceiling was an inverted landscape of the city, and the idol was, of course, inside. And then outside, you had the Pied Piper of Calcutta, but instead of mice, he had computer mice. And these computer mice was trying to say that, you know, we've got far too much technology in our lives. So the Pied Piper needs to take away the technology. And on the outside of the pandal, you had these wooden post boxes, and the post boxes symbolized the move towards writing letters again and keeping in touch physically with people rather than just being online. This was one that was made out of recycled plastic bags with a woman in front taking a selfie. There was another one made out of recycled rubber tires. This one was made out of bicycles, believe it or not. And even inside you had bicycle wheels and chains and handlebars and seats above the idol. And again, just for a week, and people visit these 24 hours a day. There's police control to ensure that there are no sort of, you know, everything is so organized and respectful, and people are just there to see the art. This one was reflected in water. This one has Durga carrying her children on her head. There are a lot of themes like, you know, women's empowerment, rape, current events that are brought into the stories and into the artistry. This again is an example of you know, the incredible creativity that they display. And this one is one of my favorites from this year. It was made out of badminton shuttlecocks and rackets. And on the left, you can see this throne with, which symbolizes the big countries of the world sitting on the globe with their guns pointed towards society. And when you went inside, you had these badminton rackets on the right-hand side, which were the countries. And the shuttlecocks were the refugees. And the the badminton rackets, or the countries were sort of, throwing the refugees back and forth, and not, looking after them. So, these are the incredible sort of visions that you would get from all these pandals. And you don't just have Durga Puja, you also have these sort of smaller festivals. This was a 2-day arts festival. So Calcutta is a lot more than just a city. It's got a soul. It's got these people that will stop to debate things that nobody else would have the time for in the rest of the country. And it's a wonderful place to really immerse yourself in a culture. So I would really urge you all, the next time you think about India, you think about planning a trip to India, you look east. And that is the sort of the basic story of Bengal. And I just wanted to introduce you to some of the game changers in the East. Of course, you've got Glenburn, that's been around for 20 years now. The Penthouse is the new entrance. You've got Darshan Dadoria with Bari Koti, Ajay Ravla with the Rajbari. And also you've got the Bhanjdeo sisters in Belgaria Palace in Orissa, and Antara Fukan, who was the first company to do cruises up the Ganges. And she's also, opening up this part of Bengal through the rivers. So Laveen, if I can just go on to the hotels now, I'll just quickly, I know many of you are sort of know Glenburn and are familiar with Glenburn, but I'll just run you through, it's 35 minutes, so I can take another 5 minutes to just take you through some of the products. So of course we started with Glenburn TSA.
Absolutely, I think people would be interested to know.
Great, thank you, Laveen. So the TSA started 20 years ago with 4 rooms and 8 rooms. The Penthouse started 2 years ago, and the private excursion started about 12 years ago. And together with all of this, we now have the Glenburn experience of Bengal. And as I mentioned earlier, in 2006, we made it to the Tatler Guide to the best 101 hotels of the world. But 2 years ago, we won the best luxury hill resort in India. And this year, we were very proud to receive the most responsible hotel in India award from Outlook Traveler. And that's a real testament to the community that we work to. So this is where we are, up in the east. And a lot of itineraries can be combined with Bhutan and Nepal as well. And now, of course, the rivers and Orissa and Calcutta. So just to give you a sense of how you can use Glenburn. For many years, people said, oh, we love Glenburn, how do we use it? There are great connections from Delhi, from the south, from Bombay. You can attach Glenburn to the end of any holiday, as well as combine it to something in the northeast or with Calcutta. And also, for many years, people have combined it with Bhutan because of the quality of accommodation. You fly into Bagdogra. It's a 3.5-hour journey up. The experience starts at the airport. Everything is included within our nightly package, including the transport. We realized that because the roads were so bad, especially the last 6 kilometers, we had to have our own transport. So a guest is received with a personal letter from our hosts, iced nimbu pani, homemade brownies, a cup of tea along the way, a picnic hamper, and a Glenburn driver, and people arrive a lot happier. Darjeeling is an 1.5 hours away, Kalimpong is 2 hours away, and we are on the border of Sikkim. Now, these are the 87 tea estates of Darjeeling. And as you can see, Glenburn up in the top right-hand corner, these white patches of private forest, you can see the rivers and you can see our location where Sikkim is. So it's really 1,600 acres of private estate just for 16 guests. So if you think about the magnitude of that, the tea fields, the mountains, this was what we started with, 4 rooms, and the Burra Bungalow. And as you step out from the Burra Bungalow, that's the view that you get. This is the Water Lily Bungalow, which has another 2 rooms on the top floor. And as you come down the steps and you sort of go into that little the door over there, you can access the other 2 rooms that have direct views of the mountains. So these are views from the Water Lily Bungalow suites, but lots of common verandas. Each room is different. They have extra beds, extra rooms, private dining areas, direct access to the garden. The Kanchenjunga suite is great for a family. The Simbong butterfly room, which is the smallest room, on which we offer a 10% discount only because it's slightly smaller. Even this room has a fabulous morning view. This is sunrise from the Simbong Valley in the east. And this is the Water Lily Bungalow. And Darjeeling town is up on the hill over here. And Darjeeling town is at 6,000 feet, Glenburn is at 3,000 feet, which makes us a year-round destination because our weather is a little bit more forgiving than up in Darjeeling. So even in the winter, it's not too cold to visit us. It drops to about 6 degrees possibly at night, and during the day, it's a comfortable 19, 20 degrees. These are rooms in the Water Lily Bungalow. And the Camellia Suite has views of the mountains, tea fields, as well as a river. And food is a huge part of the Glenburn experience. We have these wonderful communal dinners where people interact with guests from around the world, as well as our management. But we also do private dining. So you can actually dine privately, breakfast under the pomelo tree. We grow a lot of our own fresh salad vegetables, and people will travel around the country not touching salad and then come to us and be very happy that they can pick their own. Tell us about special events. We will surprise them with a cake. For honeymooners, we embroider their initials onto pillow covers if you give us a few months notice. And then of course 1,600 acres to explore. So you've got the tea experience, you've got 8 villages with 1,000 workers and their families. I've mentioned some of the technicalities of the tea earlier, but it's a fascinating tea tour that takes sometimes an hour, sometimes 3 hours, depending on how much the guests want to interact with our managers. And then of course picnics around the estate, 1,000 acres of private forest just across from Sikkim. We have a log cabin, we have a fishing program. This year we've actually launched a conservation program to save the golden mahseer. And the black and white picture shows one of our managers from the 1920s and the size of the mahseer that he caught from this river, the River Rangit. And we're trying to educate the locals to try and conserve the mahseer. You can actually spend the night over here in our log cabin to set it up. This is the footbridge into Sikkim. We have village walks, a bamboo forest, another river called the Rungdung, and fabulous picnics, which are quite elaborate, taking you up the mountain, down the mountain, lots of birds, wildlife, insects, bird watchers love to come to Glenburn, and we've trained up our staff to identify most birds. Darjeeling is an hour away, so you can spend a day out there visiting the Mountaineering Institute, the toy train, the Gu Monastery. Kalimpong is 2 hours away. There's a twice weekly market and a monastery and lots of orchid nurseries. And then of course the people, the local community is such a big part of the experience. And we have a school program where we educate children through private schools. We have 65 children in private schools, as well as 3 local schools, which the guests visit. They lead assembly, they teach them songs. We have a music and dance academy, bonfires in the evening, cooking classes, massages. We mainly do FITs, but we also have special interest groups. So this was a New Zealand chef, Peter Matthias, who comes out twice a year with her groups. And all our staff are locals. So we're very proud of the fact that we have 55 people working with us. And this is one of the reasons why we are such a responsibly sort of affiliated hotel in terms of our sustainability and our practices, because everything we have created has been with the local community. The community is the hotel is the community. We really do believe that. We have nobody from a hospitality management school, and for 20 years they've been able to maintain our standards. So just like in Glenburn, you look up to the mountains. In Calcutta, you look out to Victoria Memorial, the Glenburn Penthouse. Again, a fabulous view. You can almost touch it on certain days. 9 suites in a modern office building. So it took us 7 years to create character inside. So this is the entrance on the 7th floor. So, sorry, on the 8th floor. And this is the drawing room that looks out onto Victoria Memorial. The wallpaper from Paris. Each of the items of furniture were carefully sort of curated by Bronwyn Latif, who is the magician that I work with. And it's been really appreciated by guests over the last few years. We've got beautiful cutlery and ceramics, and the afternoon tea service is open to guests even from outside, and is a part of our package. This is the tea terrace. And Calcutta, the center of Calcutta is so green, and people just don't realize that. They think Calcutta is a dead and dying city. It couldn't be more alive, and the center is green, and you can see the race course, Victoria Memorial, the Medan, the river, all from the penthouse. This is our infinity pool on the roof, and although it looks like it's only 1 foot deep, it's actually 4.5 foot. It's much deeper, and it's got a safety rail and a second safety rail around it, so it is very safe. But fabulous views. This is the 7th floor, where we have 7 of our suites. We have Grand Bengal suites and Calcutta suites. They're all very large. They all have private dressing room areas. They have bathrooms, walk-in showers, as well as bathtubs. But it's the attention to detail that really makes Glenburn famous. The views, the proximity, the fact that we're on, we're very close to Park Street. You can see all the big sights of the city from here. And these are just some slides of the city, quirky, police buses that are teaching road safety through the Beatles, crossing a zebra crossing. The Currency Building, this is the museum that was opened a couple of months ago, showcasing art. This was just before they opened it as the museum. St. John's Church, the cemeteries, and then suddenly you'll see a herd of goats crossing the road. And then we'll take people into the markets and the flower markets where, people again want to know where you're from. They'll present you with flowers. They'll show you what they're cooking. In the fruit market, we had somebody trying to auction off one of our guests for marriage. I mean, it was this wonderful sort of community angle that hasn't been spoiled by tourism right now, if I might say so. So people are very friendly and curious. The street food is amazing. And then, of course, this is in Bomti's home, where we take people for private meals and with access to his art collection. We do a private boat cruise. We sail up to Belur Mat. We serve afternoon tea. The Marble Palace, North Calcutta, where the Bengal. These are the Jain temples where you have Greek figures and Belgian chandeliers and tiles from sort of Holland. The Potter's Market. This is a Krishna idol being made during Holi. The botanical gardens, the race course. We, introduce our guests to our local friends. We do historical tours where people can trace their roots. So this was a family whose ancestor, the master of the Calcutta Trade Association, and we sort of hooked them up with the current members of the Chamber of Commerce, and they organized a lovely tea for them. We used to take people out for dinner. Now, of course, we have the penthouse. So I would urge you all to, come to our little hotels in the East, because our passion and our sort of, what we're trying to take out to people is really something like no other. So thank you for your time. I hope I haven't talked for too long, but I could go on forever. But over to you, lovely. And to any other question.
Thank you so much, Husna, for a wonderful presentation. We've all